Little game I wanted to test. So, unfortunately, I know one man here, so you're going to be one of my assassins. I need one person from this side to play along for a 30-second game. Pinky, come on. Okay, see, he's looking down, and your chum said you're going to play along. So do me a favor, choose a secondary color. So purple, orange, green. Purple. Linda, choose a primary color that fits into purple. So red or blue? Red. Somebody from the back, choose a primary color that's not red. Come, someone. Blue. Okay, so you're my blue man. You're purple, you're red. Okay. So how this is going to work is you want 100 purples, but you're sitting with 10 blues. And he's got 100 reds at the back already. So tell me, how much red do you want to add to the blue? Do you have enough yet? You want to add 50? Okay, is it purple enough yet? You maybe want to add some more. You'll add another 10. Linda, are you going to go get some more blue to help him? Sure. Is it now too blue, or is your purple right? Do you want to add more red? Right, so what's the point here? There's a man at the back who's already ready to go forward on the project, and two guys at the front who aren't even certain what their target is, but they're working together very actively towards it. Okay, so this is an example of leadership failure. I did not tell you what your real target was, but I made you work, and I made you work. And we made our colleague look bad at the back. That's one of the ways that projects get late. Okay, so we're going to talk about failure today. And I want to give a bit of background as to why this is important to me. When I was younger, and by younger I mean primary school days, I wasn't in a particularly large primary school. But I was captain of every sports team I was in, I was top of my class, all of that, it's great. I hadn't failed at anything. I even played soccer, which was my worst sport by a long way, but it's fine. I still played midfield, I was still the captain. Problem is, I went to a very big high school. At the trials, somehow I wasn't immediately selected as captain of the under 14A cricket team. And I literally couldn't understand why. And I gave all sorts of excuses of, yeah, but I moved towns, and yeah, it's different, and I'm English and it's a more Afrikaans school. In actual fact, the other guys were just better. But I wouldn't look inwards to why that was. And what ended up happening is, at the end of under 14, I just left cricket entirely. But I then did become an umpire, and I became the first team umpire by the end of Standard 7. So what I did was, instead of accepting that I'd failed, I reframed it where I wasn't being selected from, I don't know how many, 150 boys. I was being selected out of 5. And then it's much easier to come out number 1. But what happened was I became increasingly isolated, increasingly unable to navigate the difficult social situations of being different, of not being... I used to see myself as a top person, and now nobody else saw me like that. So I became extremely socially unable to work within my peer group, which is why I was very lucky. When I went off to varsity, I decided to leave a lot of my predispositions behind. I gave up the whole English versus Afrikaans thing. I gave up the whole academic versus non-academic thing. and I found a way to fit in. But it was difficult. While fitting in, I still had to set myself certain limits, and those were academic ones, where I carved out time to be social, to play sport, but I never allowed my academics to drop below a limit that I found acceptable. But then move on, I came into the engineering space. I was at Sasol for nigh on 20 years. First almost decade was in the engineering space. And I had a great coach when I started out. And he kept pushing me, and I kept not understanding. The work I gave out was at least 80% right. And when you're at varsity, I mean, that makes you absolutely brilliant. Turns out, in the petrochemical engineering space, 80% right means people die. So I learned that you need to be 100% right. But then in typical engineering fashion, I didn't accept that just 100 is good enough. I ended up being so pedantic on every document, on every style, everything that I was doing, to the point where the value of my technical work was no longer the focus, it was all sorts of other sideshows, which made me less good of an engineer. I then moved on to production, where from the get-go you learn, but failure is just part of it. Because a good solution today is better than a perfect solution tomorrow, because you don't have until tomorrow. You need it now. The thing is, the way you fail is what's important. I learned to ensure that I still protected my safety and I protected my main targets of my plant. But I learned that sometimes you make a decision and it doesn't work out the way you want. You take it, you accept it, and you move on. And then, one day, I was offered a very exciting prospect to move out of the production space back to engineering, but away from process engineering and into the controls space. And it was with that move that I realized failure is okay, because it's through failure that I'm going to learn. So I shouldn't be saying this to one of my seniors. But there's a reason that they appointed me. There were certain skills that I did have, even if my technical skills in that field are currently a little bit behind the curve. So yeah, then when I talk about photography and pottery changing my life, so those, I know Linda knows me a bit, but Ivan's now left, but well, okay, I guess I can tell you, I'm an internationally acclaimed wildlife photographer. Do you know that there's no such thing as a good photograph? Because once you get that one, that like you work years towards something, you have a vision, and you get it. And then there's this great disappointment because it's not about that photo, it's about the journey towards it. And once you have it, then you just find a new picture that you want. You need to have better light, better action. And once you get that that's perfect, then you want, okay, but you want it of a different species. So you're constantly searching for something. And then my wife's big into pottery. And she actively discouraged engineers from being in her art class because engineers want the answer, they want it now, and it has to be right, and it has to be now. And with pottery, it doesn't work like that. When you work that clay too hard, all it does is fail. It just breaks. And if you think you can recover something by trying harder, I gave my wife so much grief. I'd say, no, just keep working, just keep working. She's like, no, she's learned. If it's failed, you start again. And you can do something as well as you think. Once it gets fired in that kiln and it comes out cracked, sometimes the humidity in the room was just too high and the thing's cracked. Sometimes you made glazed decisions that you thought would be pretty. Turns out they're not. The point is, I had to learn to take those lessons and not stop doing pottery, but accept them as part of the process. So, that was the fluff that I was asked to add while I let other people walk into the room. So let's see who else Candace can get. Also, just a disclaimer, all the other slides look really professional thanks to our marketing team. That first one I just added last night. By the way, who knows Parkinson's law? Something I recently learned. It is 3 months ago I was asked to do this presentation. I added that last slide at 9:30 last night. Parkinson's law says you will fill up time with additional effort and additional whatever, and you will start later, depending on how much time you are given. That's how projects become bloated. But okay, so I'm going to be talking about why failure is the route to the future. So please, engineers, don't kill me. But yeah, we're going to start with a typical high school, newspaper article of the who, why, when. And then we're going to push it along into how does this also speak into the supply chain system. Okay, so quick show of hands. And there is a lot of statistics on this. Who would prefer, depending on which brand you like, if it's Spur, Burger King, KFC, who would prefer to get a burger from there versus a burger from some one-off shop, Big Joe's Burgers, there on the corner? So hands up for who'd take the regular chain burger. No, just keep it up because I want to see if the stats are actually right. Okay, who'd take the independent place burger? Clearly, this is not a typical group. So, studies have shown 70% of people will take what they know. And they will do it not because they think it is better, but because they are confident it's not worse. The impact of that is you will not try something new, even if it can be to an advantage later. Humans are pre-programmed to protect their downside rather than potentially look at an upside. So, when we fail, our internal monologue immediately goes to, I have failed. And you tell yourself that you are the problem, not the idea. In the same way, if somebody else fails, that's what you tell them, that it's a person failure, and it's what other people will tell you. How often, though, would everything change if you rather viewed it as your idea or your approach failed, rather than you? So I had a guy working for me, a senior guy, very, very well-respected man. And he was very good at his job. But he would come with 10 problems, 10 risks in my area, and tell me how I am failing the team because I'm not addressing them. Then, 9 of those 10 would never realize, and I could see they would not realize. And one of them sort of did, it sort of came off, but typically that risk was appropriately mitigated. But he would then tell everyone, no, but he told me. And he himself would believe, no, but because he'd identified it, all the other risks are also a problem. Meanwhile, instead of just actively managing that risk, those other 9 opportunities could be used. So it was a constant battle for me to work with a man that was truly brilliant in his field, to get him to just accept that sometimes you have to work outside where you're comfortable. So everybody knows the whole boiled frog thing, right? You know that it's highly incorrectly used and quoted. Just because, so for those that don't know, the whole principle is you put a frog in a pot and you bring it up to boil, but you do it really slowly and you end up cooking the frog and the frog doesn't realize it's happening because it's too slow. And people use this to, one thing goes wrong, whole string of things are going to go wrong and everything's going to be a disaster. Rarely do people acknowledge that something went wrong. That doesn't mean the next 10 things are going to go wrong as well. Something went wrong and we need to address that. And very often this is an issue with seniors in the group because they've seen a lot of things go wrong. They are so concerned with protecting against it. They are so concerned that the juniors in a group will not be able to handle it and everything's just going to keep going wrong. So, what should we do? We should be like a startup business. You fail fast, you fail small, you learn, you get up and you carry on. Okay, so there are exceptions to failure. You guys all know about DuPont. DuPont prides itself in not failing. That is part of its brand. Now let me ask you, in terms of nuclear power plants, is failure acceptable? Hands up if you say yes. See, I asked it that way around because nobody wants to put their hand up anyway. So I tell you that you are wrong. Failure is acceptable. Failure does not mean Chernobyl, okay? Because that's what everybody jumps to when you say nuclear power plant failure. What about, let's start with things that are not acceptable. Let's say you design the cooling water system to have one pump, one valve, no redundancy. I mean, obviously that's not very good, okay? What if one of the valves you put in requires a little bit more maintenance than expected? You could have made a different technical decision there. Okay, that's a bit of a failure. You learn, you carry on. What if you tuned the valve incorrectly beforehand and during operation, conditions are different to what was expected? You retune the valve, everybody carries on. It would count as a failure, right? But it was fixed. What about something even less impactful? What if somebody had to design the control room? And what if they designed the door to open outwards instead of inwards? And that makes where the rubbish bin goes difficult. It's an irrelevant part, but it is still somebody failed in the design. So context matters. Size of the impact matters. So when a small business is starting up, when a group is growing, it is important to allow failure, but in a protected way. Because it's only through failure that people can grow. Because when you prevent any failure, you prevent learning. And when you prevent learning, you're going to stagnate and you're going to either become irrelevant in the market or you're going to hold, like in MegChem, if my team is so focused on just doing things in one way, we end up not being viable within a multidisciplinary team. And what ends up happening is your top people leave and the people that aren't very strong are quite fine with it because there's so many checks and balances, they don't have to be kept accountable. And one of the things that's really, really close to my heart is junior employees. 20 years ago, my group was spoken of as not as strong as in the old days. I'm hearing the same stories now. I don't think there's any difference in the juniors. I think the difference has started coming in the seniors. People with 20 to 40 years experience used to be very focused on coaching the juniors and not anymore. So sometimes we must look at ourselves. Okay, so failure is relative. You guys know that Murphy was a real guy, and that the whole story about how Murphy's Law came about, it's a little bit fuzzy, as all good stories are. But it came about when a guy called Murphy made a statement of he was doing crash tests, and there was a rig put up, and the pressure gauges were orientated 90 degrees in the wrong direction. And then they didn't work, and the whole system failed. And he said, because he hadn't checked it himself, if it was likely to go wrong, and it did. And it was become convoluted in a very good story after that. But what was he doing? It was, as I remember, in the 50s, the US Air Force wanted to be able to create ejection seats for the pilots. But the common knowledge at the time was that the human body was unable to withstand more than 18 Gs. And he was like, but I've seen other accidents that people have survived, and he could calculate that they saw more than 18 Gs. So he's like, okay, I'm going to test this. So he set up a rig, and all these other guys with their nice robes and fancy pieces of paper came to tell him that they must stop because it can't work. He ignored them. He set up a rig. He put in a dummy. He started it for 8 Gs. And the car on the rails didn't stop. It shot off into the desert because the cogs they'd put in were too weak. So he fixed the cogs. The next thing, the dummy broke. So they changed the harness. Once they got that system working, Murphy himself climbed in. Went 8 Gs, no problem. 10 Gs, no problem. He got up to 35 Gs with what he termed, what did he say? No significant impact. He discarded the separated retina, the cracked ribs. He broke his coccyx, his collarbone, a number of other things at different times during the tests. And after all of this, an ejection seat was made and used. And then Murphy said to his superiors, you know what? This is absolutely pointless. More of our pilots are dying in car accidents than in combat. So Murphy developed a seatbelt for cars, and it was an instruction that all pilots would use their seatbelts. All of a sudden, they were safe. It took another, I can't remember now if it was 5 or 10 years after that, before the passenger industry accepted putting in seatbelts that weren't designed to kill you. So the lesson we have there is just because the information you have on the table says you can't do something doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And just because you've learned something doesn't mean other people will listen. But if you don't accept that failure is a part of your path, you won't end up with seatbelts protecting passengers for decades to come. Okay, we spoke about that. Oh, yeah. The other reason that failure is relative. It's an extremely personal thing when you get it wrong. You feel really bad about yourself. So I had an enlightening moment on Sunday. I had a really, really bad weekend. My geyser stopped working. Did a water change and didn't do it very well on my big fish tank, and I lost half of my fish in an hour. And somebody drove into my car at church, all at the same time. And I found that I wasn't upset because I'd heard that a good friend's daughter was going in for a massive operation. How is a bit of bumper damage comparable to somebody that's very ill? So let's say you make a big mistake at work, but by big I don't mean somebody dies, I don't mean somebody ends up in hospital. I just mean technically it was a big mistake. You can choose to beat yourself up about it and to allow it to haunt you for a long time, or you can A, take the lesson, and B, compare it to things like, I don't know, a family member that's really sick, your overall joy 10 years from now, world hunger. Is that mistake really that big? So Roger Federer won 80% of his matches, singles matches, throughout his career. Do you know that he only won 54% of the points that he played? And what he said was, that teaches you two things. One, when you get something right, it's only right for now, you don't know what's about to come. And if you get it wrong, it's okay. 54% you get it right and only 46 wrong. Okay, so why do we fail? We've spoken a little bit about the risk-reward balance. What about competitive advantage? If you cannot come up with a newer and a better way of doing something, you're going to lose your advantage. In my C&I department now, I'm getting a bit of pushback. We're working on a new way in which we do quotations. The old way that we did it, very effective, very accurate. Took really long and cost a lot of company resources. There are better ways of doing it. The first round went well, the second round went rather badly, the third round went well. We learnt from the second round. The biggest key, I feel, to business success is enabled but accountable culture. If you give everybody the opportunity to fail in a safe space, knowing that you will be there to help them up, but ensure that they learn and everybody else learns with them, then it's fine. Because that is how your workforce will upskill themselves. Okay, so where to fail? Through the life cycle of a business. When you have a startup, this is either for a business or for a project or for a team or for an individual within the team. You start up and you've got this great idea, and then you find a way to make it work, and then you go into the smash phase where all you're doing, you're knocking down every door, you're phoning every old contact you had. You're getting work, you're getting the job done. But while you are doing that, you are failing daily because you don't know how to do it yet, and that's okay. Then you take all of those lessons, you put it through the solidify phase where you put in systems, where you entrench lessons learned within a team, and then you go to scale, and that's the part that I always find exciting because that is where you grow a team in number, in skill. That is where you can start working on your crew mix. That is where you can go from having one really senior person that knows and does everything to having a whole group that has both a variety of skills, but you have different champions within that group. Maybe you have a guy that's really good with fire and gas. Maybe you have a guy who's really good with programming. Maybe you have a guy who's really good with high corrosion system specifications. The problem is you reach success and then you think you've arrived, and that is where businesses fail, because now you're going to put in extra checks and balances. You're going to put in extra verifications that don't actually add value. And what you end up doing is taking the accountability away from the person that's doing the work, and you tell them, I don't think you can do it. So my C&I team has reached the success phase, finally. However, our view on success has recently changed. It used to be so that MegChem would have a C&I department where we could do our own work instead of having to ship it all out to a third party. We are now going through a new smash phase. We are now looking to do single discipline work. We are now looking to do work outside of petrochemical. We are now looking to do large projects, either as a single discipline or as part of a really big team in a new way. And we are doing this while simultaneously learning new methods and growing in people. And that is the most exciting part of a business, where you've learned and you are reinventing yourself. Okay, so how to fail. There are good ways and bad ways to do it. I would ask Linda what's a bad way to fail, but I'm very scared that he's going to hold me to it later. So the first is you do have internal checks, right? You don't need to have 5 sets of verification, but you at least need to have 1 set, even if it's your most senior person. Even if it's your most competent person, somebody needs to check the work. Because what if they were having a bad day? What if they confused 2 sets of design basis? Okay, so you have a safety net in. Money can be a safety net. It's a difficult one to use, and it's one that's often seen as distasteful. But we recently did a project, and it didn't work out so well, where we tried a new technology, or an established technology, but in a new application, and it didn't quite work out. What we've done is we've now had 3 different lessons learned sessions within the team, where we figured out exactly why, in this case, it didn't work, where that technology will be viable and where not. So we haven't thrown it away, we've just learned where to apply it. Reputation is a difficult one. You can sometimes rely on the reputation of saying you're part of the MegChem brand. You can rely on reputation because C&I is good, but we're a growing group, so we can't do that quite yet. Or you can rely on the reputation of certain individuals within the team. You know that if they go out to the client will know, this person will sort it out for me. The problem is, that is not the safety net you want to use. You never plan for that one. Because the problem is, I make a mistake. It's not just my project that gets hurt. It's my entire company's brand that gets hurt. So reputation, while it's there, shouldn't be used. What we do need to do, though, is be very, very deliberate with our decisions on how we're going to and when we're going to fail, and you always, always protect your downside. You need to clearly define where your risks are, you need to clearly define what their triggers are, and you need to know how you're going to protect. It doesn't help that I try a really nice, big, fancy $500 billion project, and then I have to go tell Linda, sorry, MegChem has to close its doors. Okay? If you're going to do something, do it in a way that is still manageable. And I say feel the fear, but lean in. It's about identifying and actively managing your risks. Okay, so we spoke about how to fail as a business. The important part, those bottom 2. We worked on a project. I'm bringing out all the failures because that's what we're talking about here. But we had a project where I guess we could say actually the client had made a mistake, but we could have verified as well. When it came to commissioning, all of a sudden the system wasn't working, and we realized that the wrong JB was used. It's very easy for us to have just commercially said, sorry, it's not our problem. No. MegChem C&I that day with the seniors drove to site to figure out why is it not working. We engaged with the client, we figured it out, and we followed through right to the end to bring through the solution. If you're going to make a mistake, you need to be ready to bring through the solution as well. And then the whole communication thing. So, what was the biggest leap forward in Uber? It wasn't the idea. Their whole market share jumped when one person in one marketing meeting said, why don't we just add a map of the driver? You see, the human psyche does not like not knowing what's happening. By knowing exactly where your driver is and how long they're going to take to get to you, all of a sudden it doesn't matter if it's 5 or 20 minutes because you know how long it's going to be. So you know, I can quickly go have a cup of coffee. But it's when you don't know that you get upset. If the driver had then been there in 2 minutes, you'd have been angry. More angry than if you knew it was going to be 20 and you could see, oh, there he's stuck at the robot. So in the same way on a project, if you can see things aren't going well, communicate with your client. And through that, you manage expectations, and through that, at the end of the day, everybody's happy. Okay, then in terms of who may fail and how, any leader that fails within their team, it's fine. I can make mistakes. I can allow my team to make mistakes. But what I cannot do is allow rain from above to hurt my team. That's not leadership. Because we all know leaders that allow any sort of failure. That would be the equivalent of MegChem always having to use a third party to do C&I design because they can't trust me anymore. Okay? So I'm not doing my team any service there. And the opposite, and we all know these sorts of leaders, they will prevent any failure because they don't want to look bad. But it comes at the detriment of everyone around them. And in the same way, when they start punishing failure, not learning from, they want to find someone that did something wrong because they want to protect their own merits. Whereas a good leader will ensure that everything's understood, failures are not repeated. But a good leader will focus on the future. So what do we do the day after? We need to admit what has gone wrong, and we need to work together to fix it. We need to take accountability, and we need to work together to fix it. The thing is, when you don't immediately address and take accountability, you're hurting your own reputation. And to come back from your reputational damage is the most difficult. So immediately when you know what's going on, you've got to be honest within your team, you need to understand it within your team, and you need to communicate appropriately outwards. Also, you need to be willing to break ties. Maybe you have a client that isn't long-term beneficial to you. Maybe you have a supplier that says one thing and does another. Then you don't use that supplier again. So, some practical examples. We spoke a little bit about the level measurement, but I mean, it's the same as you install a new type of valve that you think is going to work, and then you find it doesn't, but that's only part of a bigger project. And then you track that. Maybe it's allowing an eager junior resource. This is one thing I enjoy. You don't know what a guy can do until you put them in that position to do it. And when you give an eager junior resource an opportunity to do a job that's way bigger than they'd expect, just give them someone to look over their shoulder every now and then, someone that they can soundboard with. That person will this time do a good job and next time do an even better job because they have seen that you've put trust in them. They've seen that they're allowed to fail in a safe space. Well, now I spoke about the quoting strategy that we use. By doing something a little bit differently on a low-risk project, we have the opportunity to grow the way we do work overall. And it's the same as working with a new supplier. So there are certain checks that you need to put in place when you do that. The one is you obviously need to follow due diligence. You need to define the advantages for both parties, and you need to find something that is, on a business perspective, in the long term, mutually beneficial. So in supply chain, this is something that MegChem is currently actively working on, is to improve our vendors list. We are scrubbing through guys that we last used 10 years ago, and we are actively looking at adding new strong vendors onto our list. Obviously, there will be certain technical checks in this, but this is the same reason why there's so much value in person-to-person interactions on what are the technologies, what are the options, what are the styles of work that a vendor brings, because that might be of specific value to our team. A lot of this is going to be very relationship-based, because in the end, when something's not going as expected, it's the person that you phone and how they help you that will determine if we continue to use a vendor or not. MegChem is very much focused on being a business. So if we have a partner that can be a good business partner with us, that is obviously the type of vendor that we would focus on continuing to do. So, no stress, guys. This is the last slide. Failure, while it should never be a target, should be a risk that is actively managed. And I'm sure you've all experienced it, but a team that fails, but learns from that failure within the team, will later be the strongest team you ever have, because they know that it is safe to work together and fail together. And not only that, they will not make those same mistakes again. And in this context, teams could be pairs, departments, companies. It doesn't matter. Teams are teams. So, thank you for your time. Any questions? Okay, we'll start again. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Control failure and anticipated failure. How do you differentiate them? What's the pros and cons?
Controlled failure and anticipated. So, it's all about risk management. So you need to see what there is that could happen, and then you have to put things in place to manage those. Obviously, then you have your unidentified risks that can get you as well. And those are the ones where you're going to rely on strong leadership to navigate through. I don't know if I answered your question. Halfway. Anyone else? Okay, everyone can go find some coffee now. Thank you for your time. Yes?
So, I want us to go to slide. I want to take some notes because I'm still a young entrepreneur. I'd like to
Come with me, I'll give to you.
Affording that junior member a mentor, right? So let's say in the instance now you've got a client and the client is accustomed to working with a particular individual or a particular senior and trusting of that particular individual. How do you then navigate the situation of capacitating, let's say, the junior individual, one, to be able to work with his client, and even the client having the confidence to work with the junior individual?
That's a great question. It's a reputation question. So it's not going to be fast, but it is quite simple. They go together. Face to face, the person that is trusted and the new guy will go together to the client. And you tell the client, see the senior guy? He's still the one you call. This guy's going to be helping. And then behind the scenes, the junior guy does most of the work, with the senior guy helping him. And then over time, the junior guy does more of the talking during the interactions. And this is also where the role of the senior guy comes in. He needs to be mature enough that once some work has been done, during that interaction, he's like, let's just let this guy talk. He did a lot of the work. I want you to see what he could do. So he needs to present the junior person as a product to the client as well. And then with time, that relationship will grow. Because typically the junior guy is also easier to get hold of than the senior guy. And he's the guy that did the work. So it's not an overnight thing, but it's constant interactions and increasingly having more time. And it might be something as simple as you send the junior guy with a hard copy of the pack to the client and say, listen, sorry, senior guy couldn't make it today, but I thought I'd bring this to you, and if you have any questions, I can take notes. But you don't do that on the first interaction. Cool. No, nice question. Yes, sir.
I just have a follow-up question on what you said. You get to a situation whereby the junior guy can't let go of that particular client or still interfere after delegate? How do you go about that? Because you, at some point, you get your junior guy, not the client himself, but the junior guy still goes behind the, I mean, the senior goes behind the junior.
Okay, I was going to say, am I
Yes.
understanding it the wrong way? Okay. So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that the two are meant to work together, but the senior guy is still doing it
Doesn't
all
let
himself.
go of the client.
That is where leadership comes in. And it's almost always from a very positive place that the senior guy does not want to let go. He's doing it because he believes it's for the best of his company, it's for the best for the client. But it's in those cases, leadership needs to actively take a decision to grow the junior guys. And then you tell the senior guy, part of how I'm going to measure your performance is on how well you grow the young guy. Here's the one that you're going to use. And for this year, you two are going to work together. And I'm going to ask the young guy at the end, how was the coaching you got? But in the same way, you tell the senior guy, if you do a good job, I'm going to give you benefit from it. And what ends up happening is the senior guy typically embraces it so much because he gets to do more of the more fun work, more of the legwork and the more boring type stuff the junior guy can do because he needs to learn from that. So it ends up being beneficial to both parties. But if you have a stubborn senior guy, you need to first show him what the benefit to him will be in doing it this new way. So sometimes it's like you just have a guy to help you carry the files. And then it's a progressive thing from there.
Successive planning versus team growth.
With budget constraints, let's add that. Now, so, very sector and company dependent. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, and it depends on what the focus of the group and the company is at the time. Succession planning is not necessarily just for the senior guys retiring. Succession planning is also for key resources within the group. That's why I'm both a fan of having champions in the group. You don't have one guy that knows everything and helps everyone. Everybody needs to be a specialist in something, even if it's PowerPoint. You need someone that is keen with different skills and that you can cross-pollinate that way. That way, if you do lose one resource, it's only a smaller part that you have to fill. In the same way, you need to take stock of what are the overall skill sets of the group and what's lacking. Can you teach or do you need to hire in? And then you need to balance between them. But I think once any group gets over 10 people, succession planning needs to be front of mind because you can maybe absorb the loss of one, but if you lose 2 people in the same month, what then?
I have a question as a junior. I'm assuming that you've also worked with a lot of juniors from your experience. I wanted to go back to your earlier point about sometimes you need to give a junior a large project just to see what he's made of. How does one strike a balance between being eager and initiative? Because you can only learn as you do. But at the same time, you also have to be patient, and you also have to be patient with yourself because you're still adapting, you still don't want to overwhelm yourself. So how does one strike the balance between the two to ensure that you're actually developing properly? I don't know if my question makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Tell me if I'm answering it or not. So I'm well known for being extremely patient. No. I'm actually learning through that again now. So let's also redefine junior. Junior doesn't mean fresh out of varsity. Junior means new in a role. I'm currently junior. I've got 20 years experience. I'm appointed in a very high role, but it's at a new company and it's in a new technology. So I'm junior, okay? But I come with a different type of experience and other skills that I bring with me. Right? So junior can also be that you've done projects maybe in the mining sector, now you're doing petrochem. So that junior is just a bit of a spread, right? So then in terms of patience, I think there are two types of patience that are required. The one is the person doing the work must accept that they're not going to get it right the first time and that that's okay. And the person coaching them needs to accept that the junior guy is not going to get it right first time and that that's okay. The key is in the attitude. In MegChem, there's a very big thing of you appoint for attitude and you train for skill. And it's the same in any other workplace and any other project. It might not be the standard that you work 60 hours a week, but it might be during a certain phase of your life on a certain type of project that that's what's required. Bank it now. You get those lessons in, then later you're going to have them. So I think and just tell me if I've answered your question correctly, but the center of it is that you need to allow yourself time to grow, but you need to put the work in to grow. Does that answer you? Cool, thanks. I saw a hand up this side as well, was there? This side of mine. Any other questions? I'll give you all the information you want, Nana, if you just come to the front. Any last going? Guys, thank you for your time. Have a pleasant day.
Yes. What's your relation to Johan?
One good show. He works for me.
Oh, okay. I met him